go ahead and start. I want to welcome everyone this afternoon to the Wellness and Self-Care sessions that the Governor's Prevention Partnership offers. Today, we are going to have a presentation entitled Navigating Change and Building Resilience Through Self-Care. So it's going to be a good moment to spend together and take care of ourselves a bit. Stacy Watson, who is a certified coach from the Transformative Leadership Strategies, will be doing the presentation today. And she's here. As you can see, she's my co-host. Before we start, I want to go through a few housekeeping things. As you know, we're being recorded. The partnership does try to record our sessions when there isn't something that we think is too sensitive. We use this for a variety of purposes. Sometimes we make it available to people who weren't able to make it. We use it for our self-training and just plain record keeping for the partnership. We ask that during the presentation, you mute your telephone or mute your microphone and silence your telephone. If you are doing something and you want to talk, you always have that option as long as Stacy is amenable to that. By holding down the space bar, if you haven't done that before, it's a quick short cut to going through the process of unmuting and muting, and that way you can have a little bit more control over it. Our training will last for 2 hours. And like I said, it's recorded. We always leave time at the end for questions and answers. However, I know Stacy and I know the way these trainings go, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to make this a very interactive and gratifying presentation and experience for you. I would say, I noticed that Alicia, is that how you say your name? Has actually
yes, it is.
Herself. It's a beautiful name.
Thanks.
It is. We get all of these Zoom calls and Zoom trainings and so forth that we do. It's always wonderful to see your faces. If you feel comfortable, you don't have to, but it makes it a much more enjoyable and much more interactive experience for everyone if we try to keep our videos on. But again, it is being recorded, so it's really up to you. It is up to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Stacy. I'm going to stop sharing so she can have control. Stacy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so thanks, Joe. And hello, everyone. And for those of you who are turning on your cameras, I just thank you so much. It makes it much easier as a facilitator to have at least a few faces to connect with, even though it's kind of weird that we're connecting through Zoom, but this is our life now, right? So I think I miss the days of always being in person, and I appreciate the expansiveness that Zoom has brought to how we can gather together. So I think it's kind of a both and situation. So just a quick thing about myself, as Joe mentioned, I am a certified coach. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a co-owner and partner with my business partner, Alicia Davis, in Transformative Leadership Strategies, TLS. And we are so grateful for the work we've been able to do with the Governor's Prevention Partnership. And most of the work that we do at TLS is we kind of say we support people who support people. Most of our work is in supportive organizations who are in the nonprofit world. We work a lot with various state agencies. I mean, the folks that we generally are speaking with, much like yourselves, are really people who are out in their communities in a variety of capacities, making a difference in the work that they do. And under any circumstance, we recognize and applaud and appreciate the hard work. And I think these last couple of years have just accentuated just how challenging the work can be. And I know many of you and the organizations that you work with have had to get really creative, and we use the word pivot, trying to figure out, can we stay open? Do we not stay open? How do we stay safe? What are our options? What's the funding going to be? I mean, the questions have gone on and on and on, and to some degrees continue. And so today's session is really just about how you can bring some support to yourself I think what I've noticed in the work that I've been doing these years now with Alicia through TLS, with folks such as yourselves, is many of you have what we like to call the caregiver DNA, meaning given your choice, you're likely to be focusing on someone else much more quickly than you would be focusing on yourself. And to be honest, you all make the world go round, right? I mean, if it's people like all of you that are able to sort of see beyond themselves and see the need that is out there and sort of respond to that. And that is wonderful. And we know that the downside of that is that it can leave us with our own internal gas tanks on E, right? That we can sort of get to the end of the week or start a Monday morning and just feel like, I don't know how I'm going to bring it today, right? Or I don't have anything left to give to my child or my partner or myself. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of the age-old topic of self-care. We're going to try to do it in a little bit of a different way. And I just want to say, and we'll say throughout, I feel like the idea of self-care has gotten a lot of airtime over these last 2 years. And so as Alicia and I have been working together, doing research, going out, listening to different thought leaders, trying to kind of figure out what can we bring to offer to people such as yourselves that might be helpful, that might be something that would be restorative and supportive. And I keep looking for that magic sort of, potion. And if there is a magic potion, it's self-care. And unfortunately, because I feel like in some ways we're all tired of hearing it, it is in fact what all of the research is showing, that it is the extent to which we can really pay attention to ourselves, even just for moments at a time, can make a huge difference in terms of how we're able to show up for others. So that's my intro, and that's what we're going to talk about. But we're going to get there by first talking about the challenge of change. And I know, Joe, that you wanted me to put the handout in the chat. So I want to see if I'm smart enough to do that. So just give me a moment, everyone. And let me
Meanwhile, I'm
see.
trying to find out if I'm that smart too. So we'll do it together.
All right. I think this is going to work. I just need a moment to go get it. I just figured out, I didn't actually figure this out. Alicia, my business partner, showed me how to do this not that long ago. And I feel like, I don't know if you all feel this way, but anytime I learn something new with technology, I'm like, woo, look at me. So anyway, so we are going to reference the handout today, and it is in the chat. So if you'd like to pull it up and have it handy, if you've got a printer, you can print it. If not, it's totally fine, but we'll be going back and forth between the slides and the handout. But there's a little exercise we'll do using the handout, and I'll have it up on the screen, so you can make it work either way. All right, well, great. Well, let's just jump in and talk a little bit about the idea of change, because I think when you consider some of what has made the pandemic really challenging, I mean, we could go on and on and on and list the myriad ways that the coronavirus has disrupted all of our lives in every facet we can think of. And if you kind of distill that down to its essence, I think that a lot of what has been challenging about this experience has been the uncertainty of what is coming, sort of where we are and what is coming, and the amount of change that we've had to kind of integrate into our lives all at one time. And the truth of the matter is, we're not really wired for change, even though we're always dealing with change. Even without a pandemic, we're always dealing with change. But I'm just curious, I don't know if you can relate to this picture, but this is a little bit like what it is for humans, for all of us when we experience change, right? So there's this looming feeling that we know that something is happening and we don't quite know what it is. And so there's uncertainty that comes with that. And we may feel like we are not prepared. And I can tell you, whether you had small children at home last year because of COVID, or whether you were a leader in an organization trying to figure out how to keep the doors open, whatever various roles you have played, there may have been moments where you thought, I don't quite know if I'm up for this task, right? And so that kind of uncertainty can be very wearing. we get very attached to what we know, of course, right? It makes perfect sense that we would be attached to what we know. And we may not feel like we are ready for whatever is coming next. And I know that just even as a parent, as my children move from one stage of life to the next, sometimes I feel like I'm not quite ready for that. I mean, I have two brand new drivers. So let me tell you, that is a new phase of life. And so having, sort of the ability to navigate through those kinds of changes can be really hard. And of course, if we've gone through change in the past and it hasn't gone well, or as we think about it, we recognize that it was a really difficult moment, I think sometimes that can sort of flavor the way we think about change. So all of this is just the way we are as human beings. We have this hardwiring sort of need for certainty, for safety. And so when we're in these very unsure moments, we can look a little bit like that dude running down the street saying, what the heck is all this going to mean for me? Right. And so that whole cycle creates the sense of resistance. Like, I am not excited or enthusiastic about this change. And so I think that, when we think about that, then of course, we think about this idea that, well, change is always happening. The truth is, we are always changing. Every single moment of every day is a change. So we have a few ways we can approach it, right? One is that we just sort of sit. On a different session, we have a picture of a rickety bridge. And if you were with me last time, you might remember that, because I think it might have been in the session that we just did with all of you, where you're standing in front of like a rickety bridge and it doesn't look very safe. And you have these options. I can, run as fast as I can across and hope for the best, or I can just get paralyzed and get stuck on the side, or maybe I just take, a laboring step by step to get across. And these are the options we have when we're faced with change. And so the question is, how can we navigate change in a way that allows us to grow, and in a way that allows us not to feel completely overwhelmed and exhausted all of the time? And the way that that really happens for us is through this idea of resilience. So I'm just going to stop the share. And I would love actually, I think what we're going to do is we're going to hop in a breakout, because I think it'll be easier with this many people for you to just have a smaller conversation. So I would just invite you to go into your breakout room. We aren't going to be there too long. And just talk about sort of how it has been for you to navigate all of these changes. And it's probably sometimes fine, sometimes not so fine, but just what have you noticed about yourself as you've had to kind of navigate these changes? And then we'll come back. And if anybody would like to share, of course, it's always great to hear a couple of thoughts on the question. What has it been like for you to navigate all of the changes that we've had over these last couple of years? So let me just open the breakouts, and we'll try to put 3 to 4 people in a room so that you don't have so many. And let me just make sure, Joe, that you're not in one of the rooms. You're not, okay. And let's just plan to be in the room for about 6 minutes. So that should give everybody just a minute or two to talk about how has it been like for you to navigate change. So I will open the rooms. You should see the invitation to go into your room on on your screen. And at the end of the time, you'll just automatically be brought back here. So there's nothing that you'll need to do. And just be sure to take yourselves off of mute when you get into your room. So you can look at your screen and you should see an invitation. Everyone that's left on the screen, you should see an invitation to the breakout room on your screen. I just did a quick look and nobody's in their room alone, so that's always good. Do you want to keep the recording going during the breakout, Joe? Is that easier? You're on mute, Joe.
It's probably easier. I won't forget. They can always.
Okay, no problem. No problem at all. How have you been?
I'm trying to figure out how. I've never dropped anything into the chat, and it just doesn't seem to be working for me. Why?
I picked my computer in the drop down of options, even though my document is sitting in a Dropbox. I selected my computer and it brought up my file folder view. And then I just could go into my file folders and select the document. So that's how it worked I have a Mac. I don't know if that matters,
Yeah,
but
I did that. Let's try again. I'm just going to practice because I should be able to do this instead of relying.
Well, I will say I felt very accomplished once Alicia showed me how to do it. Then I thought, well, it wasn't that hard, but I don't think I even knew it was an option, to be perfectly honest.
I just assumed it would be cut and paste, but that's just me. Kind of silly. Okay. Let's see. That wasn't it. But too many folders, that's the problem.
Oh, looks like something came through.
Oh.
Nicely done, Joe.
Hey, big girl now.
Hey, we have to take our, here, I'm gonna give a little round of applause for you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think next time I'll just have it, someplace easier to get to than
Yeah.
Down 20 files. Yeah. So how much time are they going to spend in the chat? I was busy trying to.
They have just under 2 minutes left. So they were there, they're there for 6 minutes. So
okay. All right.
it is beautiful outside today. It is really cold, but it is so, so pretty.
My highly unreliable weather app says that Thursday and Friday it should be near 60.
I know, it's crazy.
And tomorrow 45. I'll take it.
Yeah, that'll help some of this melt.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone will be back in just a couple of seconds here. Awesome, welcome back. Great. Welcome back, everyone. Well, I would just love to hear if anybody would like to share either what your experience of change is or has been, or maybe even just a theme that came up from the conversation that you had in your breakout. So anyone wish to share any thoughts on navigating change and how that is for you? And just be sure to take yourself off of mute bottom left on your screen, and you can also put anything in the chat that you'd like.
So because I'm an instructor and I teach GED and I also teach 3 math classes, there is no schedule. You kind of come in and see what's on the agenda for today. And then hope that, if you do come in and you create that agenda for yourself today, once you know, if there has been any new rules that have changed. Are we in distance learning? Are kids coming in person? Are they staying? What's happening? Then you can kind of create your plan for that day. But even then, like you might get a surprise meeting or like a training they want you to attend. So like you don't have any control over what you're doing once you leave your house and you go into work. And I think for a lot of us, if we are the person who has that planner and I write stuff down at 9:30, I know this is supposed to happen and you're used to that, it's very, very overwhelming to not have even the tiniest little bit of control of what your day is going to be like.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. I'm actually throwing a little heart to all of the educators in the group because I don't know how people have been able to do what they've done in terms of just keeping our kids, our young adults educated, even in the face of so much challenge. And so, yes, I think the point you're making is so important that if we do tend to be that person that likes to have the planner, that puts the list together, that likes to know what's happening, in what order, it has been a really difficult time because there's very little of that certainty for most of us right now. And I think depending on the role that you have, even less than others, right? Or even less than what you would expect. So there's no question. Anyone else like to share their experience of change? Well, I'm going to go back to the slides because one of the ways that we know we can support ourselves during change is this idea of resilience, right? And resilience is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And, you can sort of see our little cartoon where you've got the adversity dragon blowing the fire on top of the little dude. And the question is, how do we kind of support ourselves? And we often will think about this idea of resilience. And I'm just curious, I'm going to stop the share again. And I'm just curious, sort of, what do you think of in terms of resilience? How do you define it? Or what comes to mind when you think of the word resilience? And again, you can take yourself off of mute and share, put something in the chat, but just how do you define resilience, or what does resilience mean to you?
To me, it means bouncing back to the norm. But now, with what we're faced with now, what is our new norm? I guess that would be part of the question. But resilience would be bouncing back to the norm. That's what I've always interpreted it as being, or defined.
I agree 100%, David. And I also agree that who knows what that is anymore. But yes, I think that's often the way we have thought about that for sure. Other thoughts? What is resilience?
It is strength-based.
Strength-based.
We usually it's associated with trauma survivors.
Yes,
like being resilient and all that. That term is used a lot.
Yeah, no, it's true, Nashka.
Like bouncing
I really
back
appreciate
from the trauma. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think, and many of you I know work with individuals who have experienced trauma. Many of you may have experienced trauma yourselves. And so there is this sense of what is it about a person that allows them to kind of come through some very challenging circumstance and sort of make it to the other side. And we often think of resilience in that way. Absolutely. Nicole put overcoming in the chat. Tina's talking about thriving. Michaela, handling anything life throws at you. Absolutely. Yes, yes, and yes. Any other thoughts about resilience? I'm just going to go ahead and pull the slide back up. So there are a million definitions that you could find that are going to sound very similar. We liked this one in particular. So this organization that you see sourced on the slide is an organization called HeartMath. And we highly recommend, if you are in the field where resilience and these types of topics are important to the work that you do, this is a great resource, this website, heartmath.org. And we really like their definition, and there are some specific words here that we want to just really point out. So the way they define resilience is the capacity to adapt successfully in the presence of risk and adversity. So the capacity to adapt successfully in the presence of risk and adversity. And the first word I really want to highlight in this definition is the word, I'm sorry, I just lost my screen. Just going to have to stop the share and pull it back up because I have no idea what happened to it. So the first word I want to highlight is one that we're going to come back to again and again, and it's this idea of capacity. And the reason I like that is because it really just reminds us that there is a certain amount of capacity that we need to have even to be resilient. So to be resilient requires us to have some capacity available for our resiliency. And how do we build that capacity? That's through self-care, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So this is the capacity that we have to adapt successfully, which means that we're going to be dealing with change. We're going to have the unknown. We're going to have the uncertainty. We're going to roll into the office with our list of 5 things we're going to do today and not get to any of them, or maybe only get to one of them. So when we're faced with this risk and adversity and challenge, how can we continue to adapt? And it's very much based on our capacity. And so that's sort of how resilience really matters here. And to David's point, you know, I've often said resilience has to do with bouncing back. And the truth is we probably are never bouncing back and never were, even though that may be what we said. And certainly it feels like now that we are sort of shifting into new ways of doing everything. We're shifting into new ways of going to the movies, of traveling on planes, of going to restaurants, and who knows how much of that will stick and how much of that will change over the next year or two. And so it's this idea of how can we adapt successfully? How do we move through these moments of change so that we can really be prepared to sort of face whatever comes next? And so we can think about it like when we go through, and I love Nashka's comments about trauma, you know, when we experience a traumatic event, that actually becomes part of us. And what the research shows is it's in our body and it is part of who we are. And so how can we integrate all of this challenge in a way that allows us to be healthy? One of the thought leaders that we've been listening to some over this last year is a woman, she's a therapist named Esther Perel. And she has a couple of podcasts out that are really interesting if you're a therapist and or if you're interested in therapy, where she actually does therapy with couples on her podcast. And it's just very, very interesting. I'm a therapist, so I find that very interesting. But one of the things that she's really talked about is just the importance of connection through all of this change. And how do we stay connected to ourselves? How do we stay connected to each other? So it's just all of that as a way to support us as we kind of navigate through all of these moments of unknown. And we liked this picture because I think sometimes when we're faced with these really challenging moments, we approach them like we are Usain Bolt on the right here, the sprinter, right? Who in his day was the fastest man on the planet. He's probably been overtaken by some young person. But when I was watching the Olympics as a younger person, Usain Bolt was all that, right? He was the guy. And so if you're going to go out and do a sprint or run the 100-meter dash, you know, you are going to literally bring everything you own and you are going to put it all out on that track. And at the end of that 8 seconds or 10 seconds or however long it is, you have expended all of your energy. And I think sometimes when we are faced with these kinds of challenging, trying moments, this is what we do. We get into our fight flight kind of response system, and we bring all of this energy to try and sort of navigate through. And what happens is we're sort of depleted, but we're still in it. You know, it's a little bit more like the guy on the left who's the marathoner. If he approached his race the way the sprinter does, he'd get about half a mile down the road and be done. But he's got to go 26.2 miles. So he has to figure out, how do I pace myself? How do I recharge myself? How do I drink water at the right time, or eat some protein or carbs at the right time, so that I'm really able to make it that full distance? And I think that's really what we are all faced with, is how do we sustain ourselves in a really regular, methodical way, so that we're able to kind of continue to build our capacity to kind of successfully navigate change, successfully navigate whatever adversity comes our way. So both responses make perfect sense. It's just recognizing that if I'm about to be in a car accident, I need my fight, flight, freeze I need that cortisol response to help me be safe. If I am navigating a 2-year pandemic, it's probably more like a marathon, and I have to bring kind of energy in a different way. And that's really sort of what we're talking about here. So what I want to do is we're going to actually go back into our breakout rooms. I'll put you in some different rooms. And I would love for you to just share, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, just examples of how you have been resilient, right? And maybe it has to do with how you are navigating in these moments where you just don't know what's happening next. Maybe you have a story from at some point in your life where you were able to be very resilient. But I think it's also, it's really helpful, I think, for all of us to recognize these moments of strength that we have, because sometimes we overlook them. You know, we're in the process of living our life, so we're not always reflecting. And so this is an opportunity for you to really think about, how has resilience, your own resilience, helped you to kind of get to today, to get to the place that you are right now. And we'll have a little bit more time in the room, so I'm going to make the rooms a little bit bigger. There'll be a couple of more people in your room, just so that we can have good conversation. And so and I think we're doing really well on time here, so I think we can do about 15 minutes in the room, and that should allow everybody an opportunity to share a little bit about how you sort of, just examples of how you are and have been resilient, and the role that resilience has played in your life. So I'm going to open the room, and then again, we'll be welcoming any thoughts or questions or comments that come out of your conversation. So you can you can accept the invitation into your room on your screen. And for anyone still on the screen, you should have an invitation into your breakout room.
I'll be right back. I have a small cat who's demanding.
Oh my gosh, I have a small cat too. I'll be right back as well. I'm just gonna put myself on mute and walk over to let her in the room.
Okay, all right.
No, 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 no.
Anybody bothering you?
All right, come on. Come see Joe. Come on.
Ooh.
This is Button. She needs to have her nails cut.
Oh, she's a pretty one.
She's a little girl. She's old. She's 14. Well, I don't know. I guess it's not that old for cats, but
Yeah,
she's just very petite. So
it's a cutie.
she usually just sleeps at the end of the bed. I have my office space kind of in our bedroom area. And, but today she's been very much in my space. So she must be needing, no, okay, that's not going to work for me. All right, get down. Oh, you have a little one as well?
I
A kit?
have a lot of animals in my house. I have 3 kittens, and
Do
they all
you have the
kind of-
mama cat or did you adopt their
No,
kittens?
no, there are different ages. You know, I
Oh.
have a daughter, and as she wanted new pets, we got new pets. And the youngest one, we got last summer. Somebody had thrown him out of a car on the highway.
Oh,
And this young couple, the sweetest young couple, stopped and rescued him, but couldn't keep him.
yeah.
But they can be so darn demanding when they want something. you know?
It's so true.
Uh,
It is so true. They can be so demanding. Absolutely. I know. And do you have dogs as well, or
I have
are you
one dog.
one
I
dog?
put her upstairs in the bedroom because if someone goes down the street, she might bark, and she's very loud. So
Yes. My 2 dogs are downstairs. So my wife works downstairs and I'm upstairs. And they do bark. She has a lot of patience with them, but I'm fortunate. So I just have the cat coming in and out. So I think I got the better end of the deal, to be honest, because she might be annoying, but she's not loud. So, or not as loud anyway, that's for sure.
So are you staying busy? Are you getting a lot of contracts and so forth coming up, trainings?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say the last 2 years, 18 months or so, the vast majority of the work we've done has been very much like this. It's been very well-being based and very much just how do we support ourselves and sustain each other and all of that. And we still are doing some of that for sure. And it feels like a lot of our client organizations are really now wanting to do things around leadership development. So they're kind of shifting their focus, not necessarily away from well-being, but maybe expanding to include developing leaders. And I mean, it makes sense because before the pandemic, most organizations had various ways that they tried to develop their leaders, help them learn leadership skills and, just develop their skill sets. And all of that got put on the side burner with COVID, and then it was all about just the stress and all of the challenge that we were experiencing. And so everybody's number one focus was well-being. And so it's very interesting, just as we were kind of rounding out 2021 and coming into 2022, and more we're talking to organizations that want to, put together a program like over a period of months. So they put a cohort of leaders together and kind of go through a program where they can really learn new skills and then practice them together and practice them and come back and talk about it. And we love that work as well. So it's been great.
That's good. So that would indicate that people are starting to feel like their normal is coming back.
Well, I think people are beginning to recognize that, we are kind of where we are. And so we have to be able to navigate well as leaders, even when we're still kind of in the midst of all this uncertainty. The other thing I'll say is that I think there have been so many staffing challenges from so many of our organizations. I know you're hearing that as well.
Yeah.
And I think that these kinds of programs that some of these organizations are looking at are really, they're not necessarily retention plays, but I think they are ways to let their staff know that they really want to support them and help them grow and develop. And when you're competing for talent, it can't hurt to be offering those kinds of opportunities. So I think there's a little bit of that going on too.
Definitely. And probably they need more leaders because they need different skill sets with less staff to do.
Well, it's
the work,
interesting.
right?
I was just talking to a woman who's an executive director of a Head Start oriented program. And she was saying that it's like we have this huge middle manager gap because people of a certain age, they were part of kind of this great resignation, reevaluation, whatever the word is you want to use, like folks who are sort of maybe right on the precipice of making that decision anyway. A lot of those folks moved on, and some of those individuals were senior leaders in their organization. So then that opened up space for maybe some of the middle managers to move up. And so now there's this kind of dearth of leadership in sort of the earlier stages of leadership. And so some of what we are being asked to do is to really support new leaders, just to help them even understand themselves as a leader, and just some of the basic things, which I don't mean to say are easy by the word basic, but giving and receiving feedback, some communication skills, decision making, those kinds of things. I think we maybe take a little bit for granted if we've been in our career as leaders for a long time. But that very first role you have where you're managing people can be intimidating.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. I see one group has 3 people in it. Oh,
Yeah, I tried to do bigger groups because I saw that not everybody was going into the group. And so it looks like everybody's got 3 or 4.
Yeah, yeah. I think about my career and how I don't think there was ever any training like that. It's like you're kind of flung into a position, right?
Yeah, it's so true. I would agree with you 100%. I think sometimes we have kind of natural skills or talents for some aspects of leadership. Maybe we're really comfortable speaking in front of a team or speaking to senior leaders or whatever. or maybe we are really operationally minded. So when we're trying to figure out how to, make something happen, we're really good at that. I just think there's so many of those skills that, again, we don't think about, but they really are important. Probably that feedback one is a big one. I feel like we hear that one a lot.
Yeah.
Just how do I deliver
Communication.
feedback when I know people don't want to hear it? And yeah, communication, right? Sort of
Yeah.
at the root of all of it, for sure.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I think that start worrying about maintaining these groups. Yeah. I've always found that when I've been in these breakout groups that I may have said this to you before, maybe it was to Alicia. It's like they give you a small amount of time, you go into them, and then you've introduced yourself. That's about
I
it.
know. This has been part of our learning, and it's clear that some folks aren't going in, and that's certainly their prerogative. I just, the overwhelming feedback we receive, first of all, is people generally do like having the opportunity to have those more intimate conversations. It's hard to do that on a screen. It's hard to do that with a bunch of people that you don't necessarily know. And when we started these, I think I probably said to you, we used to do these very quick 4-minute, 5-minute, breakout group, and people just kept saying that is not enough time. And so we have tried to find at least a couple of moments in our webinars where we can give a little bit more time so that folks have enough opportunity to, really just share and kind of feel connected, because I think that's one of the values that comes from this.
Really like
It's always interesting to me to hear when we have, more people on the camera. It's also fun to see faces when they come back, because a lot of times they're smiling or laughing, and you could tell they were having a really robust conversation in the room, which is nice.
I like the comment about capacity. I think that's a really dynamic way to start this, because it is about building our capacity. And yet I don't think about it like that. And so.
Right. I know. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think most of us do. In fact, I'm glad you said that, because I want to offer an example of, we just started. I've always been a gym person, and I got nervous because, like everywhere else, that everybody got COVID. All of these people got COVID at the gym I was going to. And my mother-in-law lives here. She's 82. So we, have just tried to be really cautious. So I'll make a comment about capacity. Folks will be back in just a few seconds. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I was just having a really nice conversation with Joe while you were all in your breakout rooms. And I was saying that because we've been doing these sessions now for some time since COVID started, that at the beginning we used to do these sessions where we would give people 4 minutes in the room, 5 minutes in the room, and we kept hearing lots of feedback saying we need a little bit more time. It's not enough time to have a real conversation. So we try to do a little bit longer now in the rooms, just so you can have those conversations. Well, so my question to you was just, what is a way that you have been resilient, and how have you sort of brought resilience into how you've been navigating? And I would just love to hear any examples that anyone might be willing to share. Maybe you have a story of resilience that you'd share with the group, or anything else. And again, you can always use the chat, and we'd love to hear from you as well. So anything that you talked about in your group that you'd like to share with the rest. Okay. Well, yes,
All might
taking
be
your day
talking.
1 hour at a time. Absolutely. Yes. It's not even one day at a time anymore, right? It's 1 hour at a time. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, why don't we take a little break, because I think this is a natural breaking point, and then when we come back together, we'll close out on resilience. Um, I'm going to tell a little story about this idea of capacity, and then we'll kind of shift into self-care. We'll talk a little bit about the various ways we can think about self-care. We'll have a little experience together of just taking a few breaths together. You'll have another opportunity to go into breakout rooms and share about your own self-care. And then we'll get to the end of our session. I'm sure time flies. So why don't we come back at 2:05? So we'll take a 10-minute break. So 2:05, we'll come back together and we'll try to get started right on time. So I'll see you all in about 10 minutes. Okay, we're gonna get started here in just a few seconds. So if you are back and you are willing to turn your camera on, that's great. If you aren't turning your camera on, maybe if you could just give me a thumbs up with your reaction button, just so we know that folks are back, then we can get started. So either flip your camera on if you can, or just give a thumbs up. Thank you, Carmen, Tina. Thank you so much, Nicole. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. And thank you, the person on the phone. I think you raised your hand, but my guess is that you were just saying that I'm here, I'm back, which is great. Awesome. So we're going to jump back in, and I was just having a really interesting conversation with Joe about Joe. I don't know. Would you be willing to share your comment about capacity? You're on mute.
Yeah, sure. I was just pointing out that I really liked the introduction where she talked about capacity, because I've never really thought about it like that. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about different strategies to build our capacity to move forward. So I thanked her for that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you making that comment, Joe, and I agree. I don't think we often think about it in terms of capacity, and it made me think of a example I was just starting to tell Joe, and I thought I'll just wait and share with the rest of you as well. So my mother-in-law lives with us, and she's 82, she just turned 82. So as you can imagine, we've been very cautious in our house about COVID, and she's vaccinated and boosted as we all are. And when Omicron came and everybody was getting COVID no matter what, we were just really still very cautious. And I had just gone back to the gym, and then all of a sudden everyone at the gym started getting COVID. So I decided I just would put that membership back on hold, and started doing some workouts with a woman who's on YouTube. And a friend of mine, who I will say is in better shape than me, told me about this person. So I started working out with her. She had a lot of these workouts online. And the first one, I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. There is no way in heck that I could do this kind of workout. And so, but I thought, no, I've committed to this program. I'm going to keep going. And so what I found is that just simple little things that now that I've been doing it 4 or 5 weeks, I can actually do more easily than I could that first week. And I think that's the idea of capacity, right? It's like I didn't have the capacity to do all of those things that she did at the beginning. And yet I just continued to try to bring some focus to it. And over time, I built my capacity. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is how can we build our capacity in a really proactive way so that we are ready to handle change. We are ready to handle all of the uncertainty or whatever's sort of coming our way next. So I'm actually going to go back to the slides, and then we're going to flip over to the handout. So let me see here. So we talked about this idea of resilience, and hopefully you were able to share some examples of how you have demonstrated resilience. And we're actually going to talk about resilience through several different dimensions. Now, there are 4 listed here. We're actually going to talk about 6. But the idea is that we can think about resilience through many different lenses or dimensions, depending on how you want to think about it, right? So the one that maybe comes to mind most easily is probably either physical or emotional, right? Physical is how am I caring for my body? My, doing my workouts at home. Maybe it's the choices I'm making about food, that type of thing that has to do with physical. And then with emotional, we're thinking about sort of just the feelings part of us, sort of how are we caring for ourselves, or how are we building our capacity through the way we tend to our feelings. I'll flip down to the other diagonal corner and talk a little bit about mental, and that's just our minds. And we'll talk about this more, but I will say that one of the most challenging things about the last 2 years is I feel like our minds have been on overdrive because we're always in this process of trying to figure it out. I mean, Liesa, you brought this up at the very beginning. Like, if you don't know what's happening and you're just trying to make sure that you're ready for whatever's coming next, like your mind is going all the time. And that is exhausting and that is draining. And then, of course, spiritual. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but that's really whatever that means to you. But it's this idea of sort of being able to sort of see ourselves in the context of something bigger. And we'll talk about what that might mean. So we're going to think about resilience in a more holistic, holistic kind of way, in a more expansive way, as opposed to just focusing on one thing. And so what we're going to do now is, if you pull up your handout, I'll actually share that just so you have an opportunity to see it on the handout. And I can put the slide back up as well, but let me pull up the handout. I'm going to give you a moment to, yeah, here it is, to consider sort of yourself along these 6 different dimensions. So we touched on 4 of them. And the 2 that we didn't touch on, we'll talk a little bit more in a moment, have to do with environmental. And that is sort of the space that you are in, right? So environmental health might be how tidy it is, how safe you feel, that type of thing. And then social, of course, is, how connected you are or are not to the things that matter, the people that matter most to you. And so what we want to do is just invite you to take a moment, and on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is, I feel as connected to my mental self-care, resilience as I could possibly feel, or 1 might be, I feel as disconnected from my mental self-care as I possibly could feel. And most of us are going to be somewhere in the middle of that. So I'm just going to give you a moment to complete your wheel, whether you have the paper in front of you or you can just jot down on a piece of paper. And then once you're finished, if you kind of do it in the circle, you might connect the dots and just sort of see how your wheel would or wouldn't roll. It might be a little like a Flintstone wheel, a little clunky, but that's okay. We're going to talk about it. So just give you a moment to do that.
So what do you mean by environmental?
Environmental is like, I don't know if you watched the Marie Kondo show, Tidying Up on Netflix, but it's this idea of how our space can help sustain us. And so, and that is more important for some people than others. So this is not all about everything being equal, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but just sometimes that's an area we don't think that much about. And yet, if that is something that's important to you, it can be exhausting. I live with someone who is very much a tidy person. And when things are all out of sorts, it can be really challenging. So again, that's not true for everyone, but for those of us that could be true for, it's just something to think about. And we'll give this just another minute or so, just want to make sure everyone's had a minute to reflect. All right. Well, before we jump into a little quick conversation about each of these, I'm just curious if anyone would be willing to share any observations or insights that you have going through this really simple exercise of just thinking about how things are going and how connected you feel to different facets of yourself right now. So any observations?
I think that my wheel might depend on the week. Oh,
Fair enough, Kathy. Say more.
some days it's running more smoothly than others, or, but it depends.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is not a one size fits all, and it is not a one day fits all. That's for sure. Absolutely. What else? What else did you notice when you did this little exercise?
I think Lisa had her hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yes, Lisa, please.
So for me, it seems like spiritual, social, environmental are closer together, where my physical, emotional, and mental are like the same. So it's like mine is split like right in half. And I mean, if you think about it, the first half ties in with each other more, and the last half ties in with each other more. I don't know why, but that's how mine came out.
I love it. I love that insight. And who knows exactly what that means? I would imagine that is important information for you as you kind of think about how these different pieces connect, and what maybe you're feeling pretty solid in, and maybe if there's any other areas where maybe it's worth a little thought or attention. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Well, I do want to say that it is not necessarily, we do ask about your wheel rolling, and some of that is a little bit just because it's a fun question. And I always like to talk about the Flintstones wheel. And then I remember that there may be people on this call that have never watched the Flintstones. So maybe that doesn't actually mean anything. I do appreciate that. I will say that what is important is not that every number be 8, right? It's not important necessarily that every number be the same. What is important is if you notice that if there's one area that seems to be much lower, not even than the others, but much lower than what you feel like you would like it to be. And that's really the question, and only you can answer that. So you might say, you know what? It has been a heck of a week, to Kathy's point, and I got a 6 on physical because I have only done 1 walk because it's been so cold, and that's good enough for me this week. And that's perfectly fine. And there might be another part where I might say, I have been feeling an abnormal amount of stress all week, and that is not fine. And I want to really think more about that. And so that's really the power of these simple tools. As coaches, we love these kinds of tools because it just brings some awareness to what it is that we are experiencing. And it is with the awareness that we can actually set some intention. Those are the 2 pillars of coaching: awareness and intention. So if I have awareness about something, then I can make decisions about how I want to do something, either keep doing what I'm doing or do something different. But it gives me the power of agency or choice. And so what we're going to really talk about over the next few moments, and then you'll have one more opportunity to go and just share with others in the breakout room some of the ways that you're really tending to yourself. We're going to talk about these various facets. And I want to share a concept or a construct that we really started talking about with the pandemic. And it's this idea of micro and macro, because I think a lot of times when people hear the word self-care, internally, they have 2 thoughts. One is, yeah, I know I should take better care of myself. And the other is, but I don't have time for that, right? So that's the voice tape that happens when we hear self-care. And so as Alicia and I were really thinking about this, and this topic comes up in more than one of our sessions because self-care is so foundationally important, we began to really think about how we could offer it through maybe a slightly different or nuanced lens, which is to say that sometimes micro self-care, and when we say micro, we mean anything we're doing that takes 10 minutes or less. So just something small that we're doing, but we're doing it with intention, can have a disproportionately helpful effect. So if I'm thinking about my spiritual self, right, then I might just set my intention for the day. I might say an affirmation, or if I'm a person who prays, I might offer a very quick prayer. That might be something that I do completely on my own in a matter of seconds, or maybe a minute or two. Or if I have some kind of faith practice, and whether it's through Zoom or now I'm back in person and I spend time on a particular day going and being in my community, then that would be macro. That takes more time. It's more of an investment of your time. The effects of both of those things can be very much the same, though, when it comes to how am I really building my capacity through this kind of spiritual lens. So we've offered some different examples here, and I'm sure you may have some of your own, of just ways that we can tend to ourselves. And again, when we think of spiritual, this isn't really about any particular faith tradition or belief system. This is the idea that sometimes when we get so overwhelmed with all we're dealing with, it can be helpful to sort of expand our view a little bit. And I think when we think about the way that our spiritual selves operate, it is usually in the context that we are in something bigger than ourselves. And for some people, that might be very much nature-based. For other people, it may be God or some form of a higher power. So again, it's not about what that is. It's just this idea that we give ourselves a context. And so you can think about various ways that you sort of can support yourself when we're thinking about this idea of a spiritual practice. The next one that I want to just touch on briefly is mental. And again, I mentioned this before because our brains are tired. I mean, if we are going to be in this constant state of evaluating and reevaluating and then reevaluating what we reevaluated, which is really what life is like for many of us right now and has been for what feels like forever, that is exhausting to our brains. And so what that means is that we're always in that thinking, logical, problem-solving part of our brain. And what we can do to really support ourselves from a mental self-care perspective is we can force ourselves to go into the other side of our brain. And that is the artistic creative side. Now, I know you're sitting there saying, Stacey, I am not an artist. I am not either. So I am not at all saying you should be an artist. But there are many ways that we can tap into the creative part of our brain without having to go out and create a masterpiece on a canvas. You can read a novel. You can simply just walk outside and notice nature. You can doodle if you're into that. You can paint by numbers if you're into that. So any little thing that you're doing, cooking is one way that I do this for myself, because again, it's about as creative as I get, but it is a way for me to kind of get into a zone of doing something that's very different than what I do day by day. It's just really important to recognize that our brains are really fried, many of us. And if you've noticed you've been having trouble sleeping, or maybe your sleep is disrupted, that is often very much a sign that our brains need a little bit of support. And so, thinking about ways that we can really support ourselves and our mental health can be just absolutely critical. And then emotional health, of course, right? This is our feelings. This is sort of our heart-centeredness. And this, again, especially for those of us who are heart-centered to begin with, and all of the work that you have done to support all of the people that you support, it is draining. So to be able to find ways to support yourself, whether it is through the use of a therapist or a coach, or just acknowledging your feelings as they come, because sometimes just the power of acknowledging is really all we need to be able to just really recognize sort of how am I doing. I often say that the way I know my emotional health is sort of being pushed or challenged is when I have no patience, because I tend to be a pretty patient person just by nature. And when I start noticing that I'm biting people's heads off in my house for things that maybe are frustrating, but I'm kind of disproportionately upset, that's usually a red flag for me that I need to be sort of tending to my emotional health. And just in the spirit of that, I wanted to just offer that we could take a moment and just all breathe together just for a moment. This is one way that we can support ourselves emotionally, physically, and mentally. So this, and spiritually for that matter. So this one covers a lot, and it's basically just some breathing. So we're just going to do a quick little experience together if you'd like. And if you don't, that's totally fine. But for those of you who are willing, I'm going to invite you to put your feet on the floor if they're not on the floor already. And just sit up in your chair, not uncomfortably, but just sit up so you feel like you kind of have this direct line from the top of your head all the way into your belly area. You might think about it like someone has a string and they're just gently pulling you just so you're a little bit taller, because we are in our screens all the time and we tend to like lean forward. So we're just gonna sit back and kind of sit tall. And if you'd like to close your eyes, I just welcome you to do so. I will. And if you don't want to, that's totally fine. The idea here is we want to turn our attention inward. And by turning our attention inward, that means we're not really focusing on any one thing or any one person, but we're just really turning our attention into ourselves. And we're just going to kind of arrive here together. And one way to do that is just to really notice yourself in your seat. So you might notice your legs against the seat cushion and your back against the back of your chair. And as we sit just for a moment together, I want to invite you to just notice your breath. And whether you're breathing through your nose or your mouth or some combination, it makes no difference. We're just going to notice the fact that we're breathing. The crazy thing about breathing is that we're doing it all the time, but we are usually not very aware of it. And what we know is that as we begin to notice our breath, a couple of things will kind of naturally happen. One is we tend to slow down in our breathing once we start noticing it. And the other is that you start to see your breath going a little deeper into your belly area just by noticing it. So as you're focusing your attention on your breath, and if your attention wanders to something else, it's totally fine, because that's what our brains do, is they hop from thing to thing. Just come back to your breath, and I'm gonna invite you just to be curious about a couple of specific things. One is, as you breathe in your next breath and the air's going through your head and neck area down towards your chest, I want to just ask you to notice your jaw. And just notice if you're clenching your jaw, or maybe there's just a little tightness in your jaw. You can open your mouth or jaw a little bit and maybe wiggle it around a little bit. And just notice this is an area that many of us hold tension and hold. Just when we're dealing with change and uncertainty, anxiety, we can find that we're clenching our jaw and not even really noticing. And I would also invite you, as you continue noticing your breath, to just notice your shoulders as you take the breath in, and just notice if your shoulders have grown kind of tense. Maybe they're up a little bit closer to your ears. And I just invite you to just loosen your shoulders a little bit. Just let them release even just a little bit, and see if that is something that feels like a release to you. And just as we take our last couple of breaths together, I want to invite you to see if you can take the next couple of breaths and see if they can just go down all the way into your belly area. It may require you softening your belly a little bit. Just feel the restorative nature of breath as you bring in this long, beautiful breath. And as you release your breath, just pretend that you're releasing anything that is not helpful or serving you today. Maybe it's just a little chaos or stress. Just see if you can let even a little of that go as we take these last couple of breaths. And when you're ready, I'm just going to ring the bell. And we can come back together into our little Zoom room. And I'm just going to stop the share for a moment. And you might feel like you need to stretch or move your body because we're not very accustomed to slowing down like that during our workday. And I also want to point out that that was probably 4 or 5 minutes. Even just 3 of those deep belly breaths can help you to reset your nervous system. So when you are experiencing overwhelm, when you are faced with yet one more unexpected change, having just a moment to take a few of those breaths can really help just to kind of center you and reorient you as you sort of face what's coming next, which might be unexpected, as Lisa said to us earlier. So I'm just curious if anyone noticed anything as we did that little experience together. Were you able to take a few of those deep breaths? Did anyone notice either tension in their jaw or their shoulders when they did that? When you did that? I mean, you're certainly welcome to put something in the chat. Thank you, Nancy. I'm glad that was lovely. Anybody notice anything about that? And sometimes people say, I had a really hard time with it, and I totally get that too. So, and that was my dog barking, so I apologize for that. Well, I hope it was restorative to some degree. Kathy, relax the clenched jaw. I do it all the time. I'm like, I didn't even realize I was clenching, and there I was. And I do this for a living, and I was still clenching. So absolutely. Well, I'm just going to share just a couple of more. Okay, yeah, it made you stop thinking about the next thing that has to be done. Exactly. Just giving our brains a minute to rest instead of just being on that hamster wheel of constantly thinking. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'll just cover the next few slides very briefly, and then we'll go back into some breakouts. And I really am going to invite you to just share with your group different ways that you're really trying to care for yourself, because sometimes people get really great ideas from each other when we have those conversations. So physical care and physical resilience, I think this is one that we think of really easily or maybe more quickly. And this, again, micro, macro, I think sometimes people say, if I don't have time to do a 30-minute yoga thing on YouTube, or I don't have time to go to the gym, then I don't have time to take care of my body. And I want to just offer that even just standing up between meetings, if you tend to be on your computer a lot during the day, walking up and down stairs as opposed to elevators, parking a little bit farther in the parking lot, taking a few extra steps, all of those things are micro ways that we're sort of caring for our body. We can also think about in terms of how much water are we drinking and what kind of food choices are we making. So again, we know these things. And I think sometimes we forget that even the smallest attention that we're placing can really matter. Joe was asking about environmental, and this is one I think that we don't think about as often. And yet for some people, it really can be very impactful in terms of calming our mind, helping us feel a little bit more clear in ourselves. And that is just, how can I make my space work for me? And I know that space had become a really complicated topic for many of us because of COVID, because all of a sudden we're working at home, we're living at home, we're schooling at home, we're doing everything at home. And so I think for those of us who maybe are still doing combinations of those things, we've had to get really clear on, how do I stop my work and start my home? And how do I make that distinction a little clearer? And that in some ways is environmental. I know one woman on one of my webinars said, I have to actually literally close my computer and put it under my desk, because if it's sitting there, I'm going to get drawn to it. And so she really had to go through the activity or the action of actually removing it off the top of her desk. So whatever we need to do to really help ourselves with that balance. But I think that this whole idea of environmental is one that, again, we may not always be thinking about. And then finally, social. And of course, social has gotten complicated because we're not together like we used to be, or at least many of us aren't. So it might just be getting really creative about what we can or can't do and how we do it. And I know many people have all kinds of creative ways that they've found to stay connected during this time. So I'm going to stop the share. And again, I'm just going to give you, we're going to do about 15 minutes again. I'll mix the rooms up again, a little bit larger size. So there'll be several folks, hopefully, that can share. And I want to just really welcome you or invite you to share with those in your group the ways that you are trying to care for yourself, because that is how you build your capacity. And it is the awareness that it's important and the intention of the choices you're making to do so that really allow us to continue to build our capacity. So that's sort of full circle how it all connects. Any questions about that as I set up the rooms? All right, great. Well, it looks like we're going to have hopefully 4 or 5 per room. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. And the request here is just for you to share with those in your group really ways that you are building your own capacity, really showing your own resilience by caring for yourself. And maybe it's a little bit in several of those categories, and maybe you're really focusing on one. Or maybe you'd like to share what you saw out of your self-care wheel, and you're inspired to really say, I want to spend a little time focusing on whatever. Maybe I want to spend a little more time focusing on my mental health or my emotional health. So whatever that might be, I just welcome whatever conversation that you want to have in your room. So I'm going to open the rooms now, and you should see the invitation.
So you made me think about how over the holiday break, because I had a holiday break, I took this office that I work in, and I had gotten to the point where it was just so weighty for me being at home. I felt like I was staring at the corner every single day. I mean, yeah, working and doing different things and interacting with people on Zoom, but physically in the same place. I rearranged the furniture. I'm not sure it's going to stay this way, but it made such a big difference. You
Well,
know, first of all, I cleaned all the spaces.
Yes, 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 of course. Well, that, Joe, is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the environmental kind of self-care. Like, what is it that we can do to try to make our space just conducive to the life that we have right now, which of course is very different. My poor wife has been like the nomad, because I do so many of these types of presentations where I kind of have to be kind of sequestered away a little bit. So I sort of have probably the most optimal area of our house in terms of my desk space. And so she's been on the 3-season porch, in the family room, in the formal living room, you know, she's sort of in the basement, like she's hopped around and finally sort of landed in a space, which I think mostly does work pretty well for her. But yeah, your description is exactly what we're talking about. Like, what is it that I can do to just make this space feel better if I'm going to be here? That's great. What do you think it was about the new arrangement that made a difference?
I think it's just the change. I think that sometimes, you know, it's been 2 years plus, right? Sitting
Yes.
and working in the same place. I mean, not exactly, because there was that period too when I was like trying to find out where the best place would be. But when I decided on this room and made it into the office, I had the desk in one place, and it just, like I said, I was looking at the corner. Yeah, there was a window here, but it's still the corner. Like I'm in trouble,
Exactly.
you know, get in trouble and you sit in the corner.
That's right. That's right. You could think about it like a corner office, I suppose. You could say I have the corner office in my office suite,
I
but
suppose we
yeah,
could.
no, I hear you. It's important to find a place where you feel like it's, I don't know, that, you know, and I agree with you too. Like sometimes you just need to change things up a little bit.
Change it. And then you know, when you move things around, there are things behind, like the dust behind the furniture. I don't know, I'm not that clean, so there's gonna be
Yeah.
dust behind my furniture.
That's right. Yeah,
started
sure.
today trying to, I have a glass desk and that's like, you know, everything gets on it. You can see everything.
Yeah,
So
all the
stuff
smudges.
that-
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you just need to have some variety, really clean, do some deep cleaning sometimes, you know.
Now, did you tell me that your daughter is she finishing high school or she's recently graduated? I can't remember.
She's 25.
She's 25.
So
Okay,
she's
that's
gonna be
right.
26 in a few months. So yeah.
And is she also working at home or is she?
No, she does. She works in an office, so you know she gets to go out, and I'm
Yeah,
often jealous of her.
yeah, yeah,
And you know, I theoretically can go places. I mean, certainly I can meet my colleagues for lunch, and I can, you know, have a meeting at someone else's place of employment. But it's just been very difficult to arrange that. I
yeah.
think, and then I
Well, and
fall
not
into
everybody's equally comfortable, I think. So that can make it complicated too. You might have a group of four, and if a couple of people aren't yet comfortable, or I don't know,
Yeah.
it feels
Yeah.
like it's been such a yo-yo of, you know, when we feel safer, when we feel less safe. And now it's looking like the numbers are coming down and mask mandates are changing. And so I think all of us are like, we'll see, you know, we'll see what happens because
Exactly.
we don't know. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it's, for me at least, it's all self-imposed, you know?
Yeah.
It's really self-imposed. And I need to force myself to let go of some of those chains that I lock myself up with. So
Yeah, I also think depending on your, you know, just your nature, I think for some people more time at home has been a gift. They like that. And then I think it can be a little bit like it becomes a little bit of a habit, like it's just easier to be home than not be home. And so I think figuring out what the balance is between, you know, finding feeling safe and secure and all of that and you know, continuing to stay connected to other people and all of that. I think that's been an interesting conversation. I think a lot of families and couples have had, to be honest,
yeah.
and just within ourselves to figure out
Yeah.
what are we comfortable with. Yeah.
See, most of my career, I've had the option to work at home. Right?
Mm,
Academic is that, and so I never really felt like it was novel for me to be at
yeah.
home. It was,
Yeah.
and then the pandemic just made it kind of oppressive because I couldn't choose to go into the office. I couldn't choose to
Exactly.
do something different. So
Exactly. No, it's true. I think if we're feeling like we have agency and choice, that's one thing. When we feel like that's been taken away from us, then that triggers a lot of us, myself included. We don't like to feel like we don't have the choices we think we want to have. So yeah, for sure.
last summer I got into painting furniture. Somebody introduced me to chalk paint.
Oh,
Which
oh yeah.
was like
I know. I've
the
had
mad
friends go
thing
through the
after
chalk paint phase.
after a while. I was thinking there's no more place to put old furniture. I've
That's
not
so
stressed
funny.
myself out, but you know, I've gotten away from it. And there's, you know, I was sitting here thinking, you know, that was my art, you know, that was my thing
Yes.
to
Yeah, for
to
sure.
use that other part
sure.
of my brain, and maybe I need to get the
Absolutely.
chair finished. So
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that would be glad to have some of your abundance if you are painting furniture and then giving it away or offering at a very reasonable price. Some of that is really cool looking.
Yeah.
I've never done it, but I've had a few friends that have kind of done a little bit with it, and it's very interesting.
Well, I really like the ones that are more artsy, so they paint different patterns and things like
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not as easy as you would think.
Oh, I never think anything related to art is easy. I absolutely don't. I just literally in the last few months was started thinking, when I actually get to a place in my life where I have some more free time, I think I'd like to take a painting class. And I don't have any talent in it, but I just so admire beautiful painting. It doesn't even really matter the style. I think if it just speaks to me, I guess that's what art is all about. But I just yeah, I think that might be fun to do at some point. So whatever those creative outlets are, I do love to cook. So that's probably my most common one right now is just often on Sunday, I'll try to do a little cooking for the week, just a few things to have for lunch and that kind of thing. And I can spend, 3 or 4 hours. I put on a Netflix show or whatever and just putter around the kitchen and the time flies. And I think that is my kind of self-care.
Go back and forth. Sometimes I do the cooking thing. I started, well, I give the guy next door some cookies when he shovels out my driveway. He has a
That's so
he has a
nice.
truck, he doesn't
Yeah.
come and do it. It's 5 minutes of his time. It saves me a couple hours of my time.
Yeah, for
You know?
sure. That's great. I
And
love
so I
that.
pay him back with cookies. For the last couple of years, it's been working.
I feel like everybody's winning in that scenario for sure. Do you
So,
make different kinds or does he have a favorite that you make for him?
he's never told me. It's the oddest thing. It's like, I hardly know this guy, but he will come and he does this. And, once or twice he's told me I don't have to give him cookies, but whatever I'm thinking of at that time, I'll make. And I think the last time it was chocolate chip cookies, but
Does he have
not
a family or does he live alone?
I think he's single. I think he's
Uh-huh.
single. But I live in this modern
So
world where you don't
interesting.
necessarily know your neighbors. So,
I feel like if you or I were writers, that could be a great short story somehow. Like, you know what I mean? Just, I don't know, I think that'd be kind of an interesting story.
with that blizzard type snow that we had a few weeks ago, it was really nice to have
Oh,
him come with his truck.
oh yeah. That
Yeah.
was crazy. It really was. I think we didn't get in West Hartford, we didn't get as much as I think people thought we would. And then I know in other parts of the state, it was just crazy amounts. So
Yeah.
I feel like we've had more snow this year than last year. But we haven't had, I think 7 inches is probably the biggest snowfall we've had so far. So I don't know. I mean, it's still February, so I'm sure we're not done yet, but
I think that I figure as long as it just gets cold and then really warm and cold and then really warm, might really destroy the asphalt. I've noticed a lot of potholes,
yeah,
including
it's
the
hard on
one
the
that
asphalt,
keeps
that's for sure.
reoccurring down the street in front on our street. But I went through Hartford last night,
Oh,
and I had kind of off into the smaller roads, and I swear, every 2 feet there was a deep pothole. It's just like,
their roads are horrible there.
yeah.
It's just, I know I used to drive into Etna and I would drive, up Farmington Avenue or going on Albany or different
Yeah.
pathways in, and oh, so hard on your car. So hard on your car. So is this a pretty typical turnout in terms of the number of people that attended today?
I think for the wellness things, yes. We
Okay.
usually get 20 to 30.
Okay,
sometimes even
perfect.
less. But it's wellness. So, we did this thing for an advisory board. I was very disappointed that there weren't more because it's,
Mm,
you know, it's for the schools. It was just 1 hour and it was, you know, I figured, you know, they're going through such a difficult time, you know,
yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
staff are really stressed and they need to take a moment, but, you know, they don't. So
Well,
what can
I
you do?
know.
You
I
just
feel
offer
like,
it to
yeah,
them.
you offer the
Yeah.
options and try to promote it. And then, I guess people
Yeah.
will come if they will. I will say that I have noticed in a couple of our kind of association organizational clients where they're offering our topic to, a kind of variety of people. That I have noticed that sometimes the numbers are a little lower than they used to be. And I do wonder if maybe, I don't know, maybe people feel like they've done what they needed to do for well-being. I have no idea, but I thought this was a great turnout today. So it's been exciting. Everybody will be back in just a few seconds, and then I'll say a last few things, and then I'll turn it back to you, Joe. Is that okay?
All right.
Great. Awesome. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you were able to have some really interesting and inspiring conversation in your rooms about ways that you're caring for yourself and the variety of ways you might be doing that, or maybe it was something related to your self-care wheel and any insights you had. I guess just before I turn it back over to Joe to kind of bring us home at the very end, is there anything anyone might like to share about sort of how you're trying to approach self-care to kind of help your own resilience and help yourself? Yes, David, please.
You know, we talked about a number of ways that in our room of self-care and what we've been doing, and there was quite a variety of suggestions and how we're doing it. We didn't discuss the wheel, but I think when we walked out and I said I was going to mention this when we got into our general session here is, the nice thing about this is, Stacy, we realize we're not alone.
Yes.
That every one of us at some level are trying, we're truly testing our resiliency. We've all had a bit of trauma, if you will, with what's been going on, through the pandemic and so on and so forth. So, it's just valuable to get with other people who is sharing pretty much the same experience as you're sharing,
Yes, absolutely.
So.
Well, thank you, David, for sharing that. And I guess I would just say that I feel like that comment is one that we hear often, and it touches me really deeply every time, because there is something so important about not feeling alone and about having our experience validated and normalized, to realize it's not that we have a character flaw, that this is hard. It's hard, and that we're all sort of experiencing it on any given day in different ways. And I love Nancy's comment in the chat about just remembering it's okay to start small, right? And that's the reason that we talk about those micro practices, because sometimes that's all we can do for ourselves is just something really small, and that little thing can make a difference. So I really appreciate your comment, David and Nancy. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to share our last quote here, and then again, I'll turn it over to Joe to just share the last couple of thoughts. And, many of you who have been with us before know we love Brene Brown. But, she says resilience is the ability to rise from our falls, overcome mistakes, face hurt or challenge, I would add, in a way that brings more wisdom and wholeheartedness into our lives. And she says the truth is that falling hurts, but the dare is to keep being brave and to feel your way back up. So whether we're falling or just feeling kind of stuck or challenged, I think just recognizing, continuing to build that capacity is really important. So Joe, I'm going to end there, and I'll turn it over to you to do your last few pieces here.
Well, I want to thank you so much. It has, as always, I get so much out of listening to Stacy or her partner Alicia talk about self-care. It's really, I think that my takeaway is not to give up, to keep doing it, keep trying. I think what you just said about the baby steps and the continual intention to make a difference. I think we slip into it, right? We slip into, at least I do. I've slipped into this need to do something to really take care of myself. So thank you so much for reminding me I can. And
Awesome.
I want to thank all of you for coming today. We do at the end ask you to complete a survey. It's only 4 simple little questions. So if you could, I'm going to launch it. If you could take a moment to fill out that survey. And while you're doing that, I'm also going to share, I think I'm going to try to share my screen if I can figure out where it is. Maybe I can't do it. Well, here it is. Because I want to be sure that you also know that this is one of a series that we do with Alicia and Stacy, and our next one will be in April. So this morning I was telling our communications department that it hasn't quite made it to our website yet, but it may be there now. They said they're working on it. So we have one coming up in April on the 28th in the afternoon, and then another one on burnout in June. So I think that both of them are very important topics, grief and burnout, and we'll give you more tools to put in your repertoire of self-care. So please, check out these upcoming sessions. We also at the partnership constantly have a variety of really good trainings on prevention and mentoring and topics that really impact our young people and impact us who are providers of services for our young people. So please check out our website. There are a variety of options for you that you will be able to see. And it's Alicia and Stacy's information. If you want to take note of it, it will be in your handouts, I believe.
Yep,
And then there are
definitely.
different ways that you can connect with us through Facebook, through Twitter, and through our website. And it looks like the majority of people have answered, so I'm going to click on End Poll. And with that, I'm going to tell you again, thank you. And I wish you a blessed day and a lot of self-care, a lot of good vibes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Bye, Joe.
Bye-bye.